Joe's in the mix. Round one ADP review. Here to break down some buys, sells, and some sleepers for round one starting right now on the Razzball Fantasy Football Podcast. Welcome back, folks, to another episode of the Razzball Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host, Bobby LaMarco, coming to you live from the Razzball YouTube channel. First off, before we dive into today's episode, we're really excited. We've done sleepers, we've done breakouts, we've done, ADP risers and fallers. Today's show, we're going to talk about the top of the top. Round one ADP. We're going to talk about some buys, sells, and potential sleepers, players going outside that top 12 that you should be drafting in round one. Before we do it, I bring on my special guest for today. We're going to talk a little bit. Make sure you're following us across the board at Razzball Fantasy on YouTube. Make sure you also follow us Razzball Fantasy on TikTok and IG for daily content on those platforms. Also, make sure you're going to check us out on Razzball.com. Yes, the flagship. Make sure you're checking out baseball, basketball, hockey. We also have, of course, football. But today, really, the tool you should be looking at is the Razzball ADP tool. When I tell you this thing is awesome, it's customizable. You can just filter on players, everything. Please go check it out. Me and Keelin are basing our ADP on today. So let's bring in our guest for today's show, Keelin Billue. How you doing, Keelin?
What's up, Bobby? How are you?
I am good. Make sure you're following, by the way, Keelin_12foot on Twitter. Great follow there. Great support of the Razzball content. Right now, she's all in on baseball, so we're glad we're able to steal you away a little bit for some football talk, so we're excited to get started today.
Absolutely. Glad to be here.
Absolutely. So today's show, we're going to be talking a little bit about the first round ADP. I put you on for – so you bring Keelin in, you got to bring in the hot stuff. You got to bring that first round ADP, what everybody wants to be talking about, because it's really can make or break your draft. So today we're going to talk a little bit about some buys and sells, and then we also have at the end some sleepers. So let's get started at the top. Let's talk about your ADP buy in the first round. Who's that player?
So my buy, and this was a hard pick because obviously in that top 12 they're all going to be awesome. There might be some goofs, but overall you have some pretty reliable folks. So full disclosure, last year I, as a Titans fan, I went all in on Derrick Henry. Obviously that did not work out well. So this year, after looking at everything, I'm really big on Justin Jefferson. I'm like huge on him this year. Maybe he's not, as high as some guys. Maybe he's after Cooper Kupp, but I just feel really good about him, especially after last year. I feel like he's going to keep rolling on that performance. And then I don't know. I just kind of, maybe I'm a sucker, but I love all the stuff he's saying right now. I love the confidence he has right now. Like just in the past few days, he said that he's going to be the best receiver in the NFL. He said, it's after Davante Adams, which he's going to have an interesting year. We'll see how that goes for him. But I think just with the new head coach coming in for the Vikings after a Super Bowl success, this is going to be a huge year for Justin Jefferson. So that's why I'm like, hell yeah, let's get it.
Yeah. And currently on the ADP tool, Justin Jefferson is going at 5th overall and is actually the wide receiver 2. So he is, trust me, I think a lot of people are on board with your take, Keelin, because he's going really high.
Yeah, I was super jealous last year when people had him. I was like, man, like.
I know. Yeah. But this year, you're going to be paying a premium for Justin Jefferson. Let's jump down to my player, and my guy is actually Joe Mixon. And with Joe, and Joe is not getting the love he deserves. I mean, right now today he's going at 12th overall, which is fine. But at the same time, if you start diving into what the offseason's been like for the Bengals, but also building on the 2021 season, over the second half of last year, he averaged over 20 PPR points per game. I think a lot of people don't realize how strong he was down the stretch. Now, on top of that, you add in the 3 offensive linemen they brought in. But more importantly, those 3 offensive linemen have vaulted them up into the top 10 in PFF's rankings. Why is that important? Well, since Joe Mixon has entered the league, they have not been inside the top 20. And he's been playing behind a very bad offensive line his entire career. But for the first time ever, his offensive line can be a strength. This is important because even averaging 20 points per game in the second half, he only averaged 4 yards per carry. So imagine if this guy builds on that efficiency, starts getting closer to 4.5. I'm not going to get crazy and say 5. Listen, it's still only July. I'll start to the hot takes in August. But at 4.5 per carry, you can see this guy start approaching upwards to 20, 21 points per game. That's Austin Eckler type numbers from last year. So I love Joe Mixon. I actually have him as my RB6 in fantasy. So I'm buying Joe Mixon in drafts.
Nice. That
Let's talk.
that was a hot take in itself, honestly.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think the offensive line personally improving. Plus, you got the return of all the three starting receivers. I just think the sky's the limit for this offense. So I'm trying to get as much Bengals as I can. But enough of buys. Let's start talking some guys that we're selling at in the first round ADP. Who is your ADP sell?
So, unfortunately, it's somebody I normally love. In the past seasons, I've loved just for their speed. But I picked Dodgy Harris for this, not by any fault of his own, but just because of all of the really huge unknowns with the Steelers. And the things that we do know is that, we're either going to have Mitch Trubisky or Kenny Pickett, most likely, as quarterback. And neither of them, kind of at the end there, all Big Ben was doing was passing, and Trubisky and Pickett are both kind of more runners. So without anybody passing, I just don't really foresee Dodgy Harris, getting the ball as much, or just in general doing as much. So, it's going to be a weird year. And to me, I personally would not want to risk it with him, even though I love him. Hope he does well, but it's a risky year.
Yeah, absolutely. And listen, he led the league in running back targets last year, tied with Austin Eckler, and he still wasn't even a top 5 running back. And now he's being drafted as a top 5 running back. And it's like, I don't know if I see that happening again this year. So listen, I'm glad you said it, because I would have said it if you didn't say it. So I'm faded Najee as well. So listen, I love him in the second, but in the first, not so much.
Yes,
let's talk about my player. And my guy is Davante Adams, player you just talked about. Now, no one's doubting Davante's talent. He is an absolute stud. But when you're looking at the situation for him, not only is he changing teams, and I understand that in 2020, Stephon Diggs and DeAndre Hopkins bucked the trend and dominated on a new team, but that's not the norm. It does take some time for these people to gel. I know they played in college. I totally get that. But we also have to factor in that this is a brand new offense for the Raiders. Derek Carr is learning a brand new offense. It's not like Derek Carr mastered that John Gruden offense and then you plop in Davante Adams and they could just hit the ground running. No, Derek Carr is learning a brand new scheme under Josh McDaniels. And there's a lot of disruption there. And the reason why I bring that up is because when you look at Davante Adams over the last 4 seasons, 2018 averaged over 21.5 PPR points per game. In 2020, he did the same thing. In 2021, he did the same thing. The only season that he actually wasn't as dominant was the first year in the Matt LaFleur scheme. Aaron Rodgers had a learning curve. He had a learning curve, and his points per game dropped to 17.7 PPR points per game. So my thought process is Adams is still a top 6 to 8 wide receiver, but you don't draft those kind of players in the first round, which is why he is my sell this season. All right, let's talk about some deals. Any thoughts about Adams before we move on?
No, I completely agree with you. Honestly, I looked at him as well. And, even though as my buy pick, Justin Jefferson said that Davante Adams is going to be the best this season, I disagree because of the same things. Like, most people don't really, unless it's like a super positive change, I feel like there, like you said, there's a learning curve and there's adjustments. And, having somebody like Aaron Rodgers as your quarterback, going from him to Derek Carr is going to be very different. So yeah, I agree with you.
So now, Keelin, it's easy to tell people to sell.
Yeah.
But the question is, now that we're selling these people, we have to find people to buy in the first round. So now we have a section called ADP first round sleepers, players that are going beyond. Now, typically these guys aren't sleepers, but they're not going in the first round. So there's a player that you identified currently going outside the top 12 picks that you would actually draft in the first round. And who is that player?
So I picked somebody that I had last year that regularly helped me, and that was Deebo Samuel. So I picked him because, I think I picked him pretty far out last year, and then he just had like an awesome year. He was kind of explosive, and sometimes he would literally be carrying my entire team for the most part. So yeah, to be honest, I pick him because I've had him before. He was successful. He earned more points than most folks. He wasn't that far outside of the top 12. I think he was like 14 or something like that. Maybe you remember more than I do. But yeah, he was, he's really good. And it seems to me I hate to bring this up in some ways, but like on an emotional intelligence level, it seems like he knows at this point what he's worth just based on kind of the deals he's trying to broker with the teams he's trying to broker. And I admire that. And I looked at that and I'm like, if he knows he's worth that, then yes, I'm going with him. And like I said, I think he's just going to keep getting better and better through this, and there's space there for him to get better.
Yeah, and I think with this one too is that when I was going into this process, I thought Trey Lance was going to be a problem. However, that's not the case. Last year, he actually played very well with Trey Lance, and I actually just posted the stat just shy of 24 PPR points per game in those 3 contests where Trey Lance was very involved. So
yeah.
I actually changed my mind on Deebo recently, so I do agree with you about the sleeper. My player actually is DeAndre Swift. I have officially staked my claim on DeAndre Swift as my guy this year. I'm just absolutely obsessed. He's my RB5 right now in my PPR rankings. So it starts off with last season. When you look at last year, the Lions started putting everything together. They had the offensive line. Dan Campbell comes in, Anthony Lynn. They have all these pieces, all brand new. Jared Goff's new. And still, he comes out of the gates hot. Weeks 1 through 11, the first 10 games of the season, averaging 18.7 PPR points per game. That would have been number 4 in fantasy last year, and he was number 4 or 5 over that stretch. So he was already producing top 5 numbers before his injury. However, if you just look at the scheme, now Dan Campbell is kind of running the show. Anthony Lynn's out. Dan Campbell is in overseeing the offense. Dan Campbell was a part of the coaching staff with the Saints that featured a similar player in Alvin Kamara, who, by the way, finished as the RB1 in fantasy overall. So you see that type of offense that helps. But it's also the offensive line, the continuity. PFF just released their offensive line games. I just brought that up earlier for Joe Mixon. The Detroit Lions are number 3. So he's got a top 5 offensive line. Now, what does that mean for DeAndre Swift? Well, because last year he produced those elite numbers while averaging 4.1 yards per carry. So these guys are not even that efficient on the ground playing behind average and below average offensive lines. What happens when they get efficient on the ground? The ceiling explodes. And that's how you find a potential RB1 overall in fantasy. So that's why I'm all in on Swift. Before we close, any thoughts on Swift before we go?
Yeah, I am kind of interested. So I feel like you did a really good job of explaining why, because I think for a lot of people, myself included, seeing, the Lions is a little bit of a turnoff, even though he is totally exciting. So, I mean, I feel like you covered that pretty well with the coaching staff changes. Do you feel like there's anything else there that, people should be less afraid of because he is on the Lions?
Yeah. And I think also too, they made improvements in the surrounding talent. I mean, listen, last year they played without Hawkinson for a while. They basically were throwing out Josh Reynolds off the street as their potential number 1 on the outside, while they gave all the targets to Amon-Ra St. Brown, who was a rookie. Now you give him DJ Chark and also Jamison Williams on the outside. There's just more talent to go around. Yes, exactly. So the Lions, I'm buying a little bit into Detroit, but I think the elite offensive line, the continuity on offense heading into the second year with Dan Campbell, makes me all in. Well, that's it, folks.
That's beast mode.
Yes, I'm excited. Listen, I might have to tame my expectations for Swift just a little bit, but I'm not gonna. I'm actually decided to put him ahead of Derrick Henry in my rankings, in my PPR rankings, but I'm not crazy. So it's still July, like I said before. Wait till August. I'll have that too, or something nuts. But that's so. Keelin, before we go, make sure you tell the people where they can find your content, any new articles coming out for Razzball or any other site.
Yeah, absolutely. So with Razzball right now, I'm mainly doing Razzball baseball, so you all can find me there. I cover injuries. It's a sad time, but it's a fun time. You can find me on Twitter, like you said, at Keelin_12foot. And then hopefully you guys will see me more around the fantasy football area of Razzball in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, of course. We're going to have you back. We're going to trust me, Keelin. It's over now. Now that I know you're available for the podcast, you'll be on constantly. And make sure you're going to check out the latest ADP over on Razzball.com. If you're interested into knowing the ADP tool, by the way, it's insanely customizable. Check out the tutorial video included on the page. But our first round ADP currently has Jonathan Taylor, Cooper Kupp, Christian McCaffrey, Austin Eckler, Justin Jefferson, Derrick Henry, Jamar Chase, Najee Harris, Dalvin Cook, Davante Adams, Stephon Diggs, and Joe Mixon rounding out that first round. So go check it out over on Razzball.com. Once again, I'm your host, Bobby LaMarco. Make sure you check us out on Razzball Fantasy YouTube. Also go to IG and TikTok at Razzball Fantasy. And make sure you go check out all the latest articles on Razzball.com. For Keelin, I'm Bob. We're out of here, folks.
Woo!